Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Wonderful to have you here as always. If you're a repeat listener, if you're new, thanks for coming. I hope you'll come back. I'm Dr. Margot Jacot. I am your mental health business mentor. This is a place for you to get information to help you start, grow, or figure out what it is you want to do with your mental health practice. Please join us for episodes that have to do with all things business. So today, let me tell you about a wonderful guest that we have. I am very pleased to have Linda Hunt. She is the founder of Some Solutions and the author of The Money Conversation. Speak the truth, set the standard, get paid without apology. Linda helps service-based entrepreneurs build the financial and operational structure, thank goodness, that sustains their brilliance. I love that. With a background in corporate roles and as an early pioneer of remote accounting services, she brings decades of financial and operational expertise paired with a deep understanding of how structure, clarity, and nervous system capacity shape sustainable business success. From pricing and delivery to systems, boundaries, and communication, Linda's work strengthens the business behind the service so entrepreneurs can profit sustainably, lead with confidence, and stop second guessing their worth. How amazing is that? As an entrepreneur, I need all of those things, and folks, I suspect that you do too. So, Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Margot, for having me. I'm really excited to be here as well. Everything that you just described, my business is everything that I've lived, and I now share and teach to others
Sure.
because it's about teaching others and lifting them up so that we all, what's that? There's a quote like when the tide rises, we all rise.
We
Yes.
all
So,
rise.
and there are so many entrepreneurs who have these wonderful gifts that need to be shared. And if we can take the stress out of the business, right? Because we're going to talk about nervous system capacity today. If we can take the stress out of the business and allow that business to support you, you
Mm.
can then use your gifts in a much more way that's meaningful way for yourself and for your client or your patient. Yeah.
I love that, Linda. And as you well know, most of us don't get much business training.
Right.
We start businesses thinking, hopefully we'll be able to get good advice, get good counsel from people. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But it's overwhelming to own a business, to hire people, to have to be the one where the buck stops with you. So,
Yes.
nervous system regulation is my jam. I
I
think,
love
right?
it.
Right. I think it is. Without it, we can bounce around into fight or flight. We're making decisions based on fear. We're making decisions based on a lack of information. So this is
Yes.
a great conversation. I'm thrilled.
Yes.
So, again, I think a lot of us might know about nervous system regulation, but tell us from your perspective, the
Sure.
term nervous system capacity. What
Yeah.
is that? Why is that important?
Right. So to me, nervous system capacity is the ability to hold both the stress and the abundance that comes with being a business owner, right? So
Mhm.
the job of the nervous system is to keep you safe, right? And
Mhm.
it's constantly, and change is inheriting, constant change or inherent change is threatening to the nervous system, right? So we tend to think capacity only matters when things are hard.
Mm.
But capacity also matters when things are going well. So if you're getting more clients, more money, more visibility, more opportunities, more responsibility, all of those too require capacity and clarity, right? So the reality is that many business owners are not limited by what they can achieve, right? They're limited by what they can hold. So
That's well
go.
said.
Okay. Because if your nervous system doesn't feel safe with growth, and oftentimes, I'll ask you, I'm gonna tell you what happened for me, and I'm gonna ask you this, Margot, as well. What I met myself when I became a business owner, I met,
Mhm.
you kind of hit the wall, you come up against what your limiting beliefs are. Yes,
Mhm.
you're agreeing with me, and you really meet who you are. And what I also want to stress here is that nervous system capacity, where I come at it, the angle I come at it from is let's create a structure so that the business can support you. And let's lean on that structure. Okay. And a structure can be is a process, right? It's a process. It's getting clear about what you want the outcome to be in a process, because that's not going to immediately fix your nervous system. You're still going to feel that nervousness. You're still going to feel that wobble in your throat when you maybe state your rate, or when you're handling a difficult situation with vendors, right? Because I think as therapists, you might be really well versed in handling a difficult situation with, say, a patient, right? Holding
Mhm.
them accountable. But
Mhm.
then now you've got to go talk to a vendor who isn't doing or upholding what they said they were going to do. And that's a whole different situation. So that might create nervousness for you. So in my book, The Money Conversation, we talk a lot about, I give a lot of scripting, right? Because I'll share with you that book came out of my lived experience of, in corporate, I wouldn't say I was a fireball, but I did well, right? I
Mhm.
advanced, I did okay. I understood the system. There were structures in place. Then I become a business owner, and now suddenly I have to market. I have to tell people what my price is. I now have to deliver the service. And I really just so what came forth was my people pleasing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
because when I was in a selling conversation, I would be telling them all about the things, how I can help them, but I was afraid to state my rate.
Mhm.
So I had to create a structure to hold me up so that I can learn to feel safe in those conversations. And
Mhm.
that is, so the book is really the processes that came out of that. And it took a while. I want everyone to know it takes a while. It's not like you're going to create a process and you're going to suddenly feel safe. You're going to learn
Mhm.
to strengthen that muscle by leaning on the process.
I love that. Right, because these are new muscles for most of us, and therapists tend to be nice people. And folks, I think you
Yes.
can agree, many of us want to be liked. Many of us do not
Yes.
have great capacity for conflict. Right?
Mhm.
So, that has never been me. And maybe it's because I grew up in kind of a fiery household. I learned good skills a long time ago. So conflict doesn't scare me. But still, do I like it? Do I want to have to do that? No. And it's not the muscle that I use every day because I've been a grown up for a long time. So it's wonderful to have to have those processes in place. So can you think of what would an example of that be? So in a therapist practice,
Mhm.
we don't have a lot of vendors. We might have the water delivery
Yeah.
person, but we have clients who come in and maybe they can't afford our rate. Oh my goodness, we
Sure.
want to help them. How
Right.
do we navigate those kinds of
Right.
situations?
Right. So basically, what that goes back to, the first thing as you were saying that, it goes back to boundaries, Margot, right? So when you're thinking about your practice, whether you're in practice or you're going to be starting your practice, you are not the therapist for everyone, right? I tell service providers, you are
Mhm.
not everyone's solution. If you were everyone's solution, that would be a problem, right? So you
Yep.
really have to think about not only the client, everyone talks about the ideal client, and that's very important. Don't get me wrong, but you have to think about how you too want to feel in a session, right?
Mhm.
Because so
Mhm.
I'm gonna tailor this today really to therapists, because I mean I can talk to a lot of service providers, but if you're feeling anxious or uneasy in a session with your client, you can't your patient. I'll probably say client, but they're interchangeable.
Client, patient, either
Yeah.
is fine.
Okay.
Okay.
If you're feeling, you're not going to be the best that you could be for that patient, right? So you
Mhm.
have to really figure out who you want to serve, how you want to serve them, what's the outcome. And then, and that's one piece of it, right? But the other piece of it is, and I talk about this a lot, I call it the minimum aligned price. And it is basically knowing what the dollar amount is that you need to support your life and your practice. Because if you're charging below that rate, now this is just the floor, but if you're charging below that rate, you're actually paying someone to work for them. as opposed to them paying you. And what's going to happen is you have created an uneven relationship,
Mhm.
okay, an uneven exchange. So you're providing, because let's face it, you're not going to be able to dim down how you deliver the transformation for your patient. You're just not going to be able to do it
Right,
because
right.
you're going to be operating here. They're meeting you here. Okay. So
Mhm.
when someone, so I know this is a very long-winded way of getting to your actual
No,
question, but
this is great. This is great.
okay. But when someone cannot afford your services, couple things you can do is you have to be 1,000% okay if you want to work with that person, okay, at a reduced rate. But you have to absolutely know what your rate is, right, to start with. So that's, I would never say to someone, it's not okay to bend your rate in certain situations. It is, as long as you're in alignment with it, okay? But if you start bending your rate every time someone comes in the door because you want to help them, that's a completely different issue. And that becomes a boundary
Mhm.
issue. And what's going to happen is you are filling your calendar with energetic relationships, right? Because everything's an exchange. Energetic relationships that are not sustaining you. You are supporting your clients. So you're outpouring, right? The fee that they're paying is supposed to be supporting you in your life. And if those two are uneven, you're going to resent your practice. Your calendar is going to be full, but your bank account will not be. You're going to be drained, and the business is going to feel heavier. The practice is going to feel heavier.
Mhm.
And these are all systems, signals from your nervous system saying something's out of alignment, right? So you have to ask, and you have to break it down, right? And the first place to start is when your capacity is full and your bank account isn't,
Mhm.
where is that out of alignment?
Mhm.
And sometimes it could be you're not charging enough. Okay. So you also need to have, if someone comes through your door and you really are, you're set on your rate and you've got that boundary, maybe you can refer them to somebody else who can help them,
Mhm.
right? Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but there might be other criteria. It might be rate. Like maybe a patient has to come in and meet 3 criteria to work with you. What is that criteria? Right? And
That's
maybe,
the system. That's what you're
yes,
talking about. Sure. Yes.
yes. So maybe they meet 2 out of the 3. You have to decide if meeting the 2 out of the 3 is okay with you.
Mhm.
Maybe one of those 3 is they can pay your rate, or they
Mhm.
have insurance, or they don't have insurance. I don't know what those 3 are for everyone, but if you say meeting 2 out of the 3 is fine, then you can go ahead and move with that client.
Mhm.
But if you say no, they absolutely have to meet all 3, right? Then you have to stick with that. So, for example, a lot of the work we do in my company, we're financial architects. We kind of look at the company where they've grown fast and their systems and their accounting support just does not keep up with
Mhm.
giving them good data, right? So they can make decisions from. So you would think that if you're having that visibility issue, that the owner is on board with the service, the solution that we can provide for them, but oftentimes they aren't because they think they should understand and have recognized this. So if that business owner is not on board with my coming in, my company and I coming in and fixing those things, it's not going to be a relationship. It's not going to work.
Mhm.
They're going to pay me a fee, a very large fee, and they're going to say, well, what did we get? Right.
Right.
So
Right.
I've learned that's the one criteria that cannot be violated.
Mhm.
So I encourage you to figure out what's the criteria for you that cannot be
Mhm.
violated.
I love that, Linda. And that's a great point. And boy, we could do a whole episode on the resistance of owners because most practice owners, and I'm sure this is business owners, this isn't just mental health practices, but there's so much fear and fear around money. And part of it is because in our industry, and folks, I think listeners, you know this, our profit margins are very narrow. They are super
Yes.
skinny. I had a guest on a few years back who said, if you don't have 20% margins, essentially your business is failing. It's like, I don't know any mental health practitioner who has 20%
Right.
margin in a mental health practice. So,
Wow.
so I think money becomes very scary. So when we're hiring, when we have to think about
Yes.
how do we provide a benefits package, when
Right.
somebody comes to us and wants a raise, and we just feel this incredible pressure, to have those standards, to operationalize this so that you're
Yes.
not having to riff. You're not just having to make it up every time you're going into it, because to your point, your nervous system can't
Right.
do that. So, how do people use their nervous system then to help make those decisions?
So one of the things you touched on this is to have those operational systems, right? It is to step back. And I'm not saying you have to systematize every single thing in your business, but you do want to systematize those things that are causing you the most, let's call it pain point at the moment, right? So let's take the scenario you want to hire somebody, okay? And you don't want to self-fund it, right? So what the step would be to do is that when this person comes in, right? So say you're going to hire, I don't know, and forgive me if this is not the right language, but say you're going to hire a newer therapist, somebody who's just starting out. So that person's rate might be a little bit less,
Right.
right? Or you might pay, so you might be paying them. So let's just say, and I know this is completely wrong, but it's for the math. Let's just say you're going to pay them $50,000 a year.
Mhm.
And what we have to do is, okay, so you're going to figure out it's $50,000 a year plus your payroll taxes plus a benefits package, right, for that person. So a $50,000 a year person is probably going to cost you more like 75. Okay.
Mhm.
So in order to cover that and get to a 25% margin, right, you're going to have to charge $100. I'm sorry. Well, I'm doing it wrong. So we have to then figure out. So, and I don't know how many hours they're going to be working, right? So let's just say I was going to do some quick math, but what you have to do is actually figure out their true patient hours. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
True patient hours. And I do talk about this again. I have a free resource on my website if anybody wants it. It's called the Perfect Pricing Formula, and it does walk you through this. And yes, it is geared only towards, because it's a simple diagnostic, you figuring out the rate that you need, but then you could take this and apply it to adding a team member.
Mm.
But what you have to do is, let's just say that person is going to get 3 weeks vacation, you have 11 holidays, and then they need to do notes or whatever it is.
Mm.
So let's just say, for simplicity's sake, there's 2,080 hours working hours in a year, but they're only really seeing patients 1,500 hours. So you have to
Mhm.
take that $75,000, divide it by that 1,500, and that's where you start their billable hourly rate
Mhm.
for seeing patients. Because
Mhm.
if you're not doing it that way, then you're going to be paying a therapist to see patients that you're in turn paying.
Right. Exactly.
You're exasperating the problem, okay?
Right.
And what I then need to stress is that once you do the math, you then have to measure how are the billable hours in relation to how I set that up.
Yep.
Because say suddenly that therapist needs to take, I don't know, 4 weeks off, or there's something else, or they're doing a study, which means it's reduced their billable hours, right? You have to track what you set it up against so that you can measure your profitability. And that, I think, is the key for the office, right? For building your practice and adding members to your
Mm.
therapy team.
Yep.
Yeah. Same concept would be if you
Exactly.
want to hire a front desk person or a practice manager or whatever, but that's overhead, right?
Mhm.
So that is a little bit different, but it's the same concept.
It is the same concept. I love that we're having this conversation, Linda, because this is again where I think practice owners get stuck.
Yeah.
Is they may need a virtual assistant, but they really need to figure out how to run the numbers and figure out where is that money going to come from. And once you
Correct.
know where the money is going to come from, not, well, I'm scared or I feel like I can't do it,
Yes.
then you know if you can hire that back office staff. But to your point, when we're hiring somebody at our practice, we do a total compensation package. When we're
Okay.
talking to them on the front end, before I've ever met the person, I run the numbers, or I have somebody who does this for me at this point.
Sure.
Thank goodness, lucky me. But I built it
No,
to, I
of
started
course
with
you did.
just me.
Yeah.
It's not like I landed in a pile of cash or something, but I for sure did not. But I want to know what the total compensation package would be for this person based on their licensure, years of experience, any extra training they have, what
Right.
are all of the benefit package options that we might need to offer them, everything, and how many
Everything.
hours a week might they work. And then I can come up with some numbers. So to your point,
Mhm.
that would be a process. The process is somebody
Yes.
applies. Let's run some rough numbers just so we go into this knowing this is
Right.
what we can do. And quite honestly, am I looking to have some profit at the end of that? 100%. Why would I own a business
Correct.
if I wasn't looking to have at least some profit? So it's another place where practice owners can
That's
get stuck. Why
correct.
should I profit off of the work of someone else? You're taking liability, time, risk. There's all things that go into it. So that's a great
Right.
example of a process. I'm glad you brought that up.
Good. Yeah. And use the process because that's the support structure. That's the structure that you're creating so that
Hmm.
it supports you versus you supporting it.
Yep, I love that. So when a practice owner is in a position where they're chronically stressed out and they're trying
Okay.
to lead a team, obviously, that's the situation, that's the scenario that you and your work are trying to avoid. So, how
Right.
would you advise somebody? Where do I begin? If I am just sort of spinning with this
Yeah.
anxiety, great, I need to have some processes in place. I don't even know what those are. What's a great place to begin?
Right. A great place to begin. So I think it depends on the symptom, right, that they're experiencing. I know for me personally, what was happening is my schedule was packed. So the symptom was my schedule was packed, but my bank account was experiencing highs and lows. And what I did is, and this may sound counterintuitive, but you actually have to remove yourself from the business for a couple of days. Give yourself the mental space to work through, let your nervous system calm down. Because if our nervous system is heightened, we're going to try and solve the problem from the place the problem originated. So
Mm,
we have to reduce the stress, right? Take ourselves out of the situation. And for me, it was a couple of days, but
mm,
it may work for a couple of hours. And then you have to ask yourself, like, look at the symptom, and it's usually more than one. Okay, it's more than one. But if your calendar's full, and that's pretty much the common one that I encounter with when people come to me,
mhm,
calendar's full, bank account isn't, and I have, so that tells me it's not a marketing problem. It's not a
mm,
marketing problem. It's most likely the first step I would say is as a pricing problem and or a misalignment in who you're serving,
mm,
the
mm,
patients that you're serving.
mm,
So you may need to, then I would recommend look at a couple of patients and, or if you're the therapist, what are you truly billing?
mhm,
Truth to who you're serving, right? Because there's a misalignment happening there
mm,
between what you're bringing in and what you're expending. And I know practices run lean. Trust me, I know that. Yeah.
mm.
Practices run lean. Oftentimes it's one person doing it all, having a little office space and, like you said, a water cooler, right? And there's really no one else but you doing that. Another problem could be cancellations, right? What's your cancellation problem? Do you charge for it? Do you say you do it, but you don't charge for it?
Exactly, because insurance is insurance, and we have not gotten an appreciable raise in 15 years. So
Right.
we're losing money each year
Yeah.
if we just keep
Yes.
seeing the same number of people, or if we don't change up some of our policies. We may not want to charge people, but we
Right.
may need to. So I'm glad you brought that.
Right. Right. So the copayment, right? So the insurance will cover Yeah, insurance is tricky. I mean, especially, and you may need to add to your practice services that are not paid for by insurance.
100%. Glad
Yeah.
you said that. Mhm.
Yeah, because it's not either or.
Mhm.
However, the mix of business between insurance and non-insurance paid would be important depending on how much you want to make, how much you want to work, and what the business needs. It comes back to planning,
Mhm.
right? So, and I do think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Margot, but I would think therapists are good planners because when you get a patient and you start to hear the case, you're
Mhm.
sitting there and you're contemplating, right?
Mhm.
A treatment plan,
Mhm.
right? That's the unseen work. That's the invisible work, right? So that's
Right.
part of those non-billable hours that have to be covered. And as a therapist, it's not only this industry, it's all the service industries. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the light bulb go off. Wait a minute. I'm supposed to exclude my vacation time from my capacity? I'm like, yes. That's how you get a paid vacation. It's not just something you get in corporate. You build it into your pricing.
That's
Yeah. So
exactly right.
yeah. So what you want to do, I think, as a therapist is kind of think about the treatment plan. Think of yourself as a treatment plan, right? And what do you truly want to work? What's your capacity
Mm.
for truly servicing clients well? And
Mm.
again, it goes back to answering that first question or being okay with answering that question. I'm not here to serve everyone.
Mm.
Not here to serve
Right.
everyone. Yeah.
Right, right. And for it to be okay that we need to get paid, that we need to
Yes.
make money, we're
Yes.
not bad therapists if we are financially driven as part of our mission. Everybody's
No,
got
not at all.
bills, right?
No,
We got,
and that's a money story, right? That is a limiting belief that we've kind of, I think it's kind of out there in the ethers, right? You know, grew up, you're not supposed to talk about money. You're not supposed to ask about money. Money isn't bad. Money is neutral. And I offer this money. If you have money and you're a good person, guess what you can do with that money? You can help so many more people,
that's
right?
right.
In your practice, privately, giving to a charity, helping someone in your family. But if we keep ourselves small and we dim our light and
Mm.
we say, oh, no, no, I don't need the money, we're not able to help the people we're truly meant to help. So
Mm.
I challenge everyone to money is simple, money is stable, money is reliable, money is nourishment. Money
Mm.
is nourishment.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm hoping to help change the way people view money. And I'm not a money mindset coach. I'm really more about money as a supportive resource that
Mhm.
moves naturally. And if we can view money neutrally,
Mhm.
right? And oftentimes money is the neutral thing. However, it's the vehicle, right? So when there's not enough coming in, we're like, oh my God, I must be failing. Like I'm doing something wrong. No, you're not doing something wrong.
Mhm.
We just need to sit back, think about that problem from a different perspective. How can you
Mm.
see that differently? What is the truth if you don't have enough money coming in? What is the truth of that? Is it you don't have enough patients? Is it you're not charging enough? What is the truth?
Right.
Because thinking you're a failure, that's a lie. That's a story. Because when our nervous system is trying to protect us, it's
Mm.
trying to get us to shrink back.
Mm.
It
Mhm.
is because it's trying to get us that fight or flight, right?
Yep.
And depending on how we grew up is what mode we're going to go into.
Yeah, 100%. Linda, that's it exactly. And so, what that might look like is that for the practice, there are a certain number of slots that are cash pay, and you have a cash pay rate, which some therapists think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that now?
Oh, I
If I,
love that idea. I
right?
absolutely love that idea.
And we just reserve a certain limited number because
Of
we don't want
course.
to limit access, but we are going to make more money, substantially more, 50, 60, 70, $100 more an hour
Yes.
from that cash client because we're
Yes.
not having to bill insurance, we're not having to
Correct.
take the capitated rate.
Right.
So that would be an example of a way to maybe have a
I love that.
system and
Yes.
On my caseload, I always make sure I have 2 to 3 slots that are cash pay people.
Love it.
And they have to not be a part of a panel of insurance I already take because I can't commit insurance fraud and say, well, I'm not taking you because
Right.
there are people who don't want to use their insurance. There are people who don't have insurance that I take. So there are ways to do that completely legally, completely ethically, and completely according to all of the rules. So you mentioned, Linda, one of the things you did and that you
Yeah.
would suggest is for people to kind of take a step back. I think a lot of us are taught just to start pushing harder. Push as hard as you can when things aren't going right. So, what is the impact of that, and why is it important to maybe take a step back instead of just pushing and grinding harder? Most entrepreneurs are taught to push harder. And what you're
Mm-hmm.
suggesting, Linda, is take that step back, that maybe we
Yes.
don't need to push harder. Maybe pushing harder isn't the answer. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So because I actually pushed harder, that was my first knee jerk response, right? So because I've lived this. And when, my schedule's full, the bank accounts, ups and downs, highs and lows, and I'm in a state of nervous system stress. I'm in a chronic stress state.
Mhm,
And our first reaction is to push harder because we think we're failing, right? So I think that's the driving force.
mhm,
And what I finally realized is I was running a race and I was getting nowhere. And I think the trigger for me, I saw that there's an Albert Einstein quote that, oh no, is it the definition? It's the definition of insanity. I can't remember if that's
oh,
Albert
doing the same
Einstein.
thing over again. Yeah.
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Mhm,
So I did something very uncharacteristic for myself and I took off a couple of days. So it's about giving yourself permission to step back. They're called clarity breaks or whatever it is. I actually now it's a practice where it is on my calendar.
mhm,
I do not take meetings on Mondays, right? No meetings on Mondays unless it's with a team member in an absolute emergency, but you have to boundary your schedule. So,
mhm,
but we're talking about now we're in that stress state. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Give yourself the grace to stop thinking about the problem, go and move your energy in a different way. Get physical, exercise, go for a walk, go out with a friend. Don't talk about the problem, right? Give yourself some grace for a couple of hours because when we allow space to come through and then we stop, the other thing I do is you put your hand on your heart, right?
mhm,
Because what that does is it kind of puts you into your body and you can ask, what is true for me?
mhm,
It's a very simple question, but you could ask, what is true for me? And maybe I don't like in my business that my schedule is full and my bank account isn't,
mhm.
and then just start to ask yourself different questions and your body's going to give you signals, right? That's your nervous system because the body keeps score. I don't know if you guys ever read, there's a book out there called The Body Keeps Score. It's a
Oh,
fantastic
yeah.
book written by a therapist.
Mhm,
And it's true, our body gives us signals. And if you listen to the signals, it's going to reveal the answer to you.
mhm,
And the thing that you have to remember is, maybe it's breathing and meditation, right? Remove yourself from that chronic state by doing the opposite of what you think you should do.
That's it. That's it, Linda.
That's
That's
step
it.
one.
So, to your point, and I
Okay.
think a lot of folks are going to recognize the body keeps the score and the need to do what you're saying is wise. And entrepreneurial therapists tend to not do it because we don't give ourselves permission to do so. I work with a lot of practice owners, people getting their business started, and their thought is, I just have to keep pushing forward and push harder. I've done that, I get it. But I think Linda has tapped into something, which is guess what? We also need to remove ourselves at moments and get ourselves regulated, get that prefrontal cortex back in line and ask the right questions, run numbers, make sure that what you're doing makes financial sense and common sense. those don't always go together. So if you are a practice owner, somebody just wanting to get your practice started, and you have a lot of fear around money and finances, the big takeaway from Linda's conversation with me today is come up with some absolute standards, come up with some processes. And all that means is you're asking yourself, what are the numbers? What numbers do I need? How do I follow those numbers to make decisions? Not just following the fear, because the fear will tell you no every time. It's probably the number one thing that gets in the way of starting or growing and scaling. So that's something, if you need a coach to do that with, Linda Hunt might be the person to do that with. Find someone else, please give me a call. I would be happy to work through this with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dr. Margot Jacot, your mental health business mentor. I look forward to being with you next time. Please come back and be well.